Máster en Inglés Profesional te ofrece este programa.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to Western Civilization, from Mesopotamia to Silicon Valley. I'm your host. My name is Guy Williams, and I am on TV now. I'm on video. I'm being filmed. I'm live. If you go to the corresponding page, the web page, the Von Baugan web page, you will be able to see me live. Now, on this program, I'm going to give a basic overview of what happened during Visigothic times. I've been speaking about the Visigoths and their place in the world for a while now, for more than a week. And it's time to close that chapter and to move on. Next week, I'll be talking about what happened at Covadonga, and talking about the invasion of 7/11. But for now, just an overview. Remember that it was never easy for the Visigoths. The very first Visigoth who came to Spain, pushed out of France, looking for refuge in Barcino, in Barcelona, with his wife, with Galla Placidia. And there, no sooner had he arrived than, well, he was reviewing his troops, and un enano, a dwarf, came up beside him and took a knife and put that knife, stabbed him, una puñalada, stabbed him in the back. Or at least that is the story. And his 6 children were killed almost immediately. The person who killed him, this was some kind of vendetta among the Visigothic tribes, among the Germanic tribes. Well, the person who killed him was not considered adequate to be king, not considered king material. And so they did away with him in less than a week. And so it goes on and on for the Visigoths. There were good moments and bad moments. For example, agreements with the Romans, where the Visigoths were clients of the Roman Empire and doing everything with permission, or when the Visigoths rebelled against the Roman Empire, when they cooperated. For example, the Emperor Theodoric, a great fighter who lost his life fighting against Attila, and others trying to establish themselves, trying to draw up a code of laws. Now, recently I was speaking about perhaps the greatest of them all, Leovigildo, and what he tried to do. He did many things successfully, but was not able to convert the entire country to the Arian version of Christianity. It just didn't work. His own son rebelled against him, and when he died, his second son, Recaredo, well, converted the entire country to Christianity, to Catholic Christianity, Trinitarian Christianity. Now, the fact is that this was obviously not going to happen without a reaction. I spoke about how his son, Liuba II, was on the throne and killed at the tender age of 20 because he just didn't have the power. He didn't have the connections. He didn't have the social capital necessary to impose his rule. And there was a vast conspiracy of followers of the Arian version of Christianity who were absolutely opposed to what Recaredo had done. The person responsible for this, Viterico, well, he himself killed at a banquet, 6 years later. The person taking over after that, Gundamaro, very much in the line of Recaredo and very much in the line of conciliation between Arians and Catholics, fighting constantly against the Basques. All of the Visigothic kings fighting against the Basques. They were placed in a very difficult position with the Franks in the north, trying to establish themselves in Gascony. All right. When you say Gascon y Basco, it's more or less the same thing. In what had been Aquitaine, well, they were trying to establish themselves against the Franks in the north and the Visigoths in the south. And the battles were constant. Sometimes they took more territory. Sometimes they would go as far as taking all of Cantabria. Or at least these are what the chronicles tell us, that king after king, they describe him as being victorious, but obviously not very victorious, obviously not completely victorious over the Basques, because they are a constant source of problems. Well, presumably the Basques at this time had not been evangelized. They had not been converted to Christianity at this time, which was an additional problem. Now, after Gundamaro, who took the religious capital, which at that time, supposedly, it was Cartagena. You remember that Cartagena had been the home to that the Byzantine colony, this Byzantine part of Spain. They came in through Cartagena and through Malaga, and Cartagena had been pretty much destroyed in the fighting since then. Well, it was time to remove the religious capital from Cartagena and bring it to Toledo, so that Toledo would be the patriarchate, that would be where the metropolitan lived, that would be the religious capital of Spain, in addition to being the, again, political capital, the home of the kingdom, the place where the palace and the king and the court were. After Gundamaro, it was Sisebuto. Sisebuto, in many ways, an excellent king. Sisebuto believed in education. None of the other Visigoths had. None of the other Visigoths cared anything about education. He himself could read and write. He was very concerned about bringing education into the church, because of the church at this time, very few priests knew how to read or write or even basic parts of the Bible. The church at this time was very, very much out of control. They talk about a Babylonian confusion in the church, exploitation, ruthless. That's sin piedad, no? Despiadado, ruthless exploitation of the people, and again, priests who are preaching, predicando, much more superstition than religion. It's going to be very, very difficult for the Visigoths to impose order on the church. And it's going to be even more difficult after the Visigoths are gone in the Asturian kingdom, again, to bring the church back to, for example, celibacy. One of the great issues at that time, whether the priests really should be celibate. Now, as I say, he valued education. He tried to bring Roman rule, Roman law into Toledo. He founded a navy. At the time, of course, there had been troops, but no real army. He reorganized the army, and for the first time, the Visigoths had una flota, a navy, una armada. So yes, we remember Sisebuto for this. The Basques or the Franks, we're not sure which, but maybe both working together, they had captured a large section of the Cordillera Cantábrica at that time. And Sisebuto is supposedly the person who was able to bring that area back under Visigothic control. One of the things that he is most famous for, however, is the laws that he promulgated, that he passed against the Jews, which were exceptionally cruel and which did not make him many friends. This in imitation of what was happening in Byzantium, but it didn't work in Byzantium either. It was a very, very bad idea. Subsequently, we're going to see kings that understand it's a bad idea and try to reverse it. But by that time, well, it'll be very, very difficult. He tried to put his son on the throne. This was his Romanization. Roman law has father to son, father to son. It's dynastic. Whereas the Visigothic law, it was really confusing, and you had a council that named the king. Thanks to Recaredo, there was ecclesiastical positioning in the council. Some of the seats in the council were now held by members of the church. But that really didn't help, or at least not yet. The fact is that he tried to name his own son, Recaredo II, as heir, and Recaredo II lasted 3 days. This is what the Visigoths do. This is the morbus gotorum, right? If you don't like the king, if the king isn't performing, if the king isn't doing what you want him to do, you kill him. This was the way. Now, Swintilla founded Olite just to keep the Basques in line. They had already founded Vitoria. Now it was time for Olite, just to have a military presence in the north. Evidently, because Pamplona was out of the question at that time. Pamplona could not be trusted. Pamplona evidently was not the right place. Now, Chindespinto decided that it was going to be dukes and counts, magnates, and military people who ran the country. He is the one who eliminated the idea, the Byzantine idea, that you can administer better with slaves and especially with eunuchs, eunuchos. All over, you had the use of eunuchs because obviously eunuchs, they have interests, but these interests are not dynastic. Their interests do not last more than one generation. They are not looking to make life better for their progeny, for their children. Now, eunuchs universally used in practically every empire, but not in Spain after Chindespinto. Chindespinto, we're going to see one of his descendants coming up, Rodrigo, is the one who dies in Guadalete in 711. Chindespinto, well, he, after that, it was Bamba. Remember, on yesterday's program, I spoke about Bamba and how they chose him, or at least the legend about how Bamba was chosen. That a saint said that you will find the new king toward the west, and they went to the west after Gertikos, the palace up there by Valladolid. They went to the west and they found Bamba, presumably in the town today that carries his name. There is a town called Bamba, the only place in Spain that begins with the letter W. I have read that it's the only place in Spain that has a letter W in its name. Well, here we have the place where he was found. And of course, he didn't want to be king, but it was destiny. So when they threatened him, right, le amenazaron, when they threatened him, they said, you become king or you lose your life. And he relented. He said yes. He gave in, cedió. And I was speaking about him and about the legend and about how almost immediately Paulus Flavius, something like that. I've read that he was Greek. That he, the commander in Septimania, in the place in the north that was also part of the Visigothic Empire, in what is today France, and obviously on the border with the Franks, on the border with the Burgundians, it's where you need the army. And so you had a massive army emplacement there, and the armies loyal to their generals and very quick to proclaim their generals as the new king. So Septimania, a constant source of rebellion for the Visigothic kings in Toledo. Well, obviously, yes, they rebelled. And this man came into the Ebro Valley, attacking and destroying around Zaragoza, Tarragona, Zaragoza, all of these places up in arms. But Bamba, who at this time was old, vigorous, but old and wise, or at least that's what they tell us. They tell us he was good King Bamba. Everybody remembers him as being a just, a fair, a wise king. And a good King Bamba prevailed. He was successfully able to eliminate this threat, to put down the threat of this rebellious general of Paulus. Now, the fact is that in this rebellion, the people were not enthusiastic. People did not support him. People didn't really care. And Bamba was shocked. He was mortified by this level of indifference in the general population. And so he gave the orders that everybody, from then on, everybody in his kingdom was going to have to participate in the military service, that everybody had to be ready to fight whenever the king said, and that the clergy was not exempt, that men of the church were going to have to fight next to the troops for their king in the future. And of course, this didn't win him many friends. He is called Good King Bamba, but, yeah. In Toledo, they remember him for their walls. He was the one who reinforced the walls and built bigger walls. You go to Toledo today, and there is an inscription that says, "To God and to King Wamba, this city owes its walls. And so the fact is that he was remembered as a very, very good king. A kind of a golden age under the Visigoths. He did try to impose order. Again, the clergy was not happy about the obligatory participation in military ventures, and they really, they were talking about their own Babylonian confusion at this time. That's the word they use, a Babylonian confusion. Different interpretations of the Bible, priests that are so ignorant that they have no understanding of the doctrines that they are supposed to teach. The 11th Council of Toledo was supposedly, they were going to put an end to that, and a series of sexual scandals as well, where, all sorts of things happening in the church that Bamba wanted to bring order to. And it really didn't happen. There was a young man at court, the son of a Greek, a man named Ardabasto, which would indicate that maybe he came from Armenia or someplace like that. In any case, he had been exiled or something from the from Byzantium, and he was there fresh from Constantinople, and he was the talk of the town, and they welcomed him, and he had a son, and this son was the darling of the court in Toledo. And this son, Hervigio, was very ambitious, very, very ambitious. And so he was very young. Bamba was very old. One day, Bamba, okay, there are two versions of this. The version that you get later, the version that you get in Asturias from the Chronicles of Alfonso II, okay, that version, which sounds better, says that Hervigio gave him something to drink, some strange herb or something. And in the Chronicle, they call it Spartas. And I have no idea what that could be. Spartas. In any case, he drinks this potion, pothima. He drinks this potion, and he is unconscious. And he has no memory, and he doesn't know what he's doing. And he wakes up with no hair. They have cut off his hair. They have given him the tonsura. They've given him the tonsure of a monk. And so he has to become a monk. He is obliged to become a monk. Now, naturally, he doesn't like this, or maybe he does. The versions we get are completely contradictory. According to another version, he just got ill. He got very, very ill. He had a fever. He didn't know what he was doing. And because he had been king, and because he had, ordered the death of many people, he had done lots of things. They wanted him to die in this state of sanctity. And so, just before death, right, what they did was to cut off his hair and make him a monk. Because according to the law, you can do that. You could make somebody a monk without permission, and that person would die in sanctity. That person would be without sin, going to heaven. So either they did this as a favor to Bamba, or they did this in order to take power, to usurp power from Bamba. We have both versions in the histories. So, 7 years of his life, the next 7 years of his life, he was a monk. And, increasingly, either extremely unhappy or this is what he wanted all along. I mean, according to some other versions, he didn't want to be king in the first place, and now, at the end of his life, he isn't king anymore. Who wouldn't be happy? All right, I have to take a short break now. I'll be back in just a couple of minutes with the second part of the program.
Antonio Álvarez, encantado.
Nice to meet you, Mr. Alvarez. All right, your CV says you have a high level of English, so if you don't mind, we'll continue with the interview in English, all right?
Hombre, quien dice high, medio alto más bien.
En el mundo de los negocios, el éxito no depende de la suerte. La clave es saber ver las oportunidades y aprovecharlas. Así que no dejes pasar esta oportunidad porque te lo vamos a poner muy fácil. Llámanos al 911335833 o entra en grupobaugan.com.
Alberto, it's really interesting, isn't it, that in English we don't have a specific word for canas.
That's true. Gray hair.
Yeah.
It's very literal, isn't it?
Yeah. And we don't,
Pelo gris.
yeah, but we don't even say grey hairs, do we? We just say grey hair.
Yeah, he has gray hair.
And you go grey, don't you?
Yeah.
The process is going grey.
As well as calvo, right? You go bald.
You go bald,
right?
yeah.
Eventually, if you lose your hair, you go bald.
That's right.
Right. So, but I like to say that these days I have more hair on my beard than on top of my head.
That's nice.
Y no es bird. He oído gente decir que tengo un pájaro en la cara en vez de una barba. Beard.
Beard, that's right.
Bird es pájaro, como si fuera una E. Bird. O sea, pájaros, no os equivocáis con esa.
Últimos días para conseguir tu máster de inglés profesional con una oferta inigualable. Consulta condiciones en grupobaugan.com o llamando al 911335833. ¿Todavía no has hecho tu prueba de nivel? Infórmate sin compromiso. 911335833. Consulta también el Executive Master en inglés profesional, disponible en Valencia, Barcelona y Madrid.
Gracias, ya te llamaremos.
Ya te llamaremos.
Acaba ya con la pesadilla de todas las entrevistas de trabajo y mejora definitivamente tu nivel de inglés profesional con el máster en inglés profesional de Vaughan. Llama ahora al 911335833 o entra en grupobaugan.com.
Blanco,
White,
negro,
black,
rojo,
red,
azul,
blue,
amarillo.
yellow.
Lo de mi hijo no es normal. Lleva 2 años en clase de inglés y sigue en el mismo nivel que cuando empezó. Desaparece durante 1 hora 3 veces a la semana y cuando vuelve es que no habla ni una palabra de inglés. Lo único que dice es: mamá, no quiero volver.
Si te siguen pasando estas Stranger Things con los cursos de inglés de tus hijos, es hora de salir de la oscuridad. Darles la oportunidad que tú no tuviste con Vaughan Jr. Un curso de inglés adaptado a su ritmo de aprendizaje, divertido y eficaz, con unos profesores únicos que les motivan y despiertan sus ganas de aprender. Date prisa antes de que desaparezcan las últimas plazas que nos quedan. Llama ahora al 911335832 o entra en grupobaugan.com.
Empower your English. Empower yourself.
¿Estás pensando en apuntar a tus hijos a clases de inglés en Club Junior? Aprenderán inglés con el método Vaughan, muy dinámico y divertido. Recibirán una formación de calidad y con profesores de todo el mundo. Clases por edades hasta los 10 años o por niveles hasta los 17 años. Llámanos sin compromiso al 911335832 o entra en nuestra página web grupobaugan.com.
Purchasing Company, el método Vaughan en tu empresa. Infórmate sin compromiso en el 911335831 o en grupovaughan.com. El máster en inglés profesional te ofrece este programa.
Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. This is Western Civilization from Mesopotamia to Silicon Valley. On the first part of the program, I was speaking about the many Visigothic kings, and especially King Bamba, who is the one that most people remember as being the best. He is the one that is associated with a sort of golden age. And unfortunately, or luckily for him, I mean, at this time, I talked about the ecclesiastical participation in the naming of kings. The fact is that kings at this point were anointed. They were given ointment. They were given sacred oil during their coronation ceremony. And so all of this was done under the leadership of the church. That meant that simply killing a Visigothic king was now un pecado. It was now a sin. And so these people were anointed. So there was some kind of sacred legitimacy there, justification for their being. And so it wasn't going to happen that Bamba was simply killed the way so many others had been. Well, the fact is that, Bamba, again, spent the rest of his life up in Pamplona, in Burgos. And when he died, that's where he was buried. Unfortunately, later on, I think it was Alfonso XI, or no, Décimo quizás, el Sabio, one of the Alfonsos gave the order that his remains should be put in Santa Leocadia in Toledo. And there they were for the longest time. However, during the Napoleonic invasion at the beginning of the 19th century, just for safety, Bamba's cadaver, what was left of his cadaver, his corpse, his remains, his mortal remains, were taken to the cathedral, and there they are today. Burgos would love to have them back. Pamplona would love to have the mortal remains of Bamba brought back to their original home, according to his wishes. But that probably isn't going to happen. All right, now we are at the top of un tobogán, a slide. And this slide is going to go down, down, down to the end, to the bitter end, the dissolution of the Visigothic kingdom. Things go from bad to worse. If you remember, it was the son of this Greek, they call him Greek, perhaps Armenian, in any case, an exile from Constantinople, Ardabasto. His name was Herbigio, a young and exceptionally ambitious man who takes over after Bamba. And what he does is simply ruin the kingdom. He takes all of the assets that belong to the state, that belong to the crown, and he hands them out to his friends. So what was public wealth, what was res publica, what was the crown, goes into private hands, and the state goes into ruin. Now, he is followed by Égica. This is Égica married Herbigio's daughter, so that he could be king. So he is the royal son-in-law, and that makes him king. But he is also the nephew of Bamba, and he's not going to forget that. So that the minute Herbigio is out of the way, Égica repudiates his wife, repudiates the daughter of Herbigio, gets rid of her, and starts to rule on his own. However, his rule is not a good one. I mean, he is mostly incompetent and unlucky. Years of bad harvests, cosechas, bad harvests, sequía, drought, and bubonic plague. As if that weren't enough. Bubonic, la peste bubonica, the bubonic plague ravaging through Spain. The next person to take over, Bitiza, he realizes that the previous policy of radical persecution of the Jews is a mistake, a big mistake, and invites them back with some of their rights, not all of them. And by the way, there were years and years of forced baptisms, so that a person could decide, a Jew could decide whether he wanted to become a Christian or die. And many of them decided to become Christians, forced to do so. Later, when people said, "Oh, we're sorry. Oh, that was totally unnecessary," but they did not allow them to undo the baptism and forced them to stay as Christians, because that was a sacred act, right? The sacrament had been delivered. And the sacrament, although it wasn't accepted, was still holy, so that these people were not allowed to practice as Jews under pain of death. Now, Bitiza made it lighter, but still, he and by the way, his brother, he made his brother into the Archbishop of Toledo, his brother Opas. Now, he put his son Aquila II, on the throne. His son evidently, we know about this because there are coins, right? Monedas, acuñadas, coins that were minted with Aquila II as king. The chronicles are very unclear about this. We understand that there had to be a civil war with many people involved. And so it is Rodrigo, the grandson of Chindesvinto, who rises up and becomes king. Presumably, Rodrigo here is the usurper. And in this, what they do is to invite the Moors to participate. Now, these Islamic troops, called Moors because the other side of the Straits of Gibraltar was traditionally Mauritania. That from Mauritania we get Moors, but obviously very, very few of the troops that came over were indigenous to this area. Some of the people who participated in the Battle of Guadalete in 711, some of these people came directly from the Arabian Peninsula. Others would have come from Damascus, which at that point was the seat of the administrative seat of Islam. The dynasty, the ruling dynasty at that time, the Umayyads, they had decided, Omar, the caliph, had decided to move out of the Arabian Peninsula onto the Mediterranean and expand from there. And so you've got some of these people from Syria, some of these people from the Arabian Peninsula, many, many of these people from North Africa. But what does that mean? The North Africa, we're talking about Romans? Well, we're talking about Carthaginians? Are we talking about Vandals? Because remember that is where the Vandals went. Are we talking about Berbers, Bereberes? I mean, later on in Spanish history, later on in the Middle Ages, you're going to get lots and lots of influence from the different Berber tribes. But at this point, who's coming over? We really don't know. So yes, presumably many Berbers, presumably some Vandals, other people, and then what do you have on the other side? You have Ceuta, which at that time, as far as we know, was still in the hands of the of Byzantium. The Byzantines controlled Ceuta at this time. So we really, really don't know. Now, we know that Rodrigo is going to lose the battle. I'll be talking about that. But, and we know, of course, that his wife, Egilona, is going to end up marrying these newcomers, end up marrying a man called Abdel Aziz, who is made military governor of Sevilla, his palace. And, well, she's going to persuade him. Egilona is going to persuade Abdulaziz to wear a crown. I guess just like her ex-husband, Rodrigo, wore a crown. And this is going to be so unpopular that the local population is just going to rise up and kill Abdulaziz. And that is the last time we hear about Egilona. But she must have been a remarkable woman, let's put it that way. The fact is that all of this, of course, is surrounded by legend. And one of the legends say that in Toledo, there was a house that had been built by Hercules himself. And it was called the House of God. And that Rodrigo, Roderick in English, Roddy, Rodrigo had, he couldn't help himself, right? He couldn't control himself, his curiosity. We have a saying in English, un dicho, un refrán. In English we say, curiosity killed the cat. And in this case, curiosity, or some people say codicia, some people say greed, avaricia. Greed, in any case, this is going to be very, very bad for Rodrigo. Every king prior to him had put his seal on the door, un sello, like a lock. In some versions of this story, it's a lock, cerradura, right? Candado, something like that. And Rodrigo has to know what's inside, because he has heard stories that there is a treasure inside. He's heard many, many different stories, and just without paying attention to any of the warnings, without thinking about the future, on impulse, Rodrigo simply opens all of these seals, all of these locks, including his own. And there he sees, first, a statue of a man larger than life, a statue of a man of enormous size, lying on a bed. And he knew that this is Hercules. This is the real Hercules, that he was seeing Hercules. He went on. He came to a room with a white wall. One of the walls was unbelievably white, with a kind of deslumbre, right, with a glare, and the other so black that it simply absorbed all the light. You could try to put your hand in front of it. There would be no shadow, because it simply absorbed light. One of the walls, there were 4, one of the walls was green, the color of emerald. And the 4th wall was red, blood red. In this room, there was a pillar. In the pillar, there was a kind of niche. There was a kind of an empty place, carved, tallado, in the pillar, un nicho. There was a niche, and there was a golden box there, covered with all kinds of, again, madre perla, mother of pearl, nácar, again, mother of pearl, with a white cloth, and strange pictures of men wearing turbans, with banners in their hands, with swords hanging by their side. And underneath, it was written, "Whoever sees this shall see these men conquering Spain, and they will become the lords of Spain." Now, the fact is that this is one of the many legends. Another of the legends, well, there's the table of Hercules. Then I'll be talking about that. I'm sorry, the table of Solomon. The table of Solomon, which is another legend that I'll mention on another program. But this is one of the big ones that they talk about when they talk about Rodrigo. And another legend, equally important, but of course equally fictitious, is Florinda, or in some cases Clorinda. They say that Clorinda because from that time there are no Spanish women named Clorinda, or at least I have never heard of any. So yes, they say that Clorinda, because of what happened to her, nobody has ever named their child Clorinda afterwards. In other cases, yes, they say Florinda, and in other cases, they call her La Caba. In any case, supposedly, at least according to legend, she was the daughter of Julian. In some cases, Count Julian of Ceuta. Now, in reality, Ceuta was controlled by the Byzantines at this time. At least this is what we think. And so it wouldn't have been a Visigothic count. But in any case, this is a legend, so why not? There are Arabic sources that talk about a certain complicity, a certain ally called Ian or Julian. In any case, this man sent his daughter, Florinda, to Toledo, and supposedly Rodrigo fell in love with her. And supposedly, this same Rodrigo is a creature of impulse who has no conception of self-discipline. And so Rodrigo begins to be obsessed with her, follows her around, importunes her, implores her, supplicates and begs and does everything he can in order to sleep with her. Now, this, of course, is a scandal because Rodrigo, now we understand possibly why Gilona, why his queen would be so quick to marry Abdulaziz, but that's another story. We know she married Abdulaziz as a fact. What we don't know is whether there was ever any Florinda La Caba. This is just this is beyond unbelievable. But because everybody knows this story, because it is so much a part of Spanish lore, then it's important. It's important that everybody know it. Remember that one thing is fact in English, and another thing is lore. Lore is apocryphal. Lore can be true or not. Lore is something that you should not take very seriously, but everybody knows lore. And so lore, in many cases, can be as important as facts. For example, you drop a pearl into wine, and the pearl dissolves, right? Everybody knows the story of Cleopatra, who dropped the world's biggest pearl into a cup of wine in order to impress the Romans. All right. The fact is that that doesn't happen. You drop a pearl into wine, and at most, yes, it will be discolored. It will be stained, right? Colored red, but it will not dissolve. That just doesn't happen. However, the story is so important that everybody has to know it. All right, Queen Isabella of Castile, in the taking of Granada, that war lasted for 10 years. They established Santa Fe in Granada on the other side of the Vega. They established Santa Fe as headquarters, and Isabel, we call her Isabella in English. Isabella was actively involved in the logistics, in the naming of, she was acting as a general. She was acting as commander-in-chief in many cases. Well, Isabella, everybody knows this, Isabella said that she was not going to change her shirt until Granada was taken. And this became so universally known that the French have a color that they call Isabella color. It's a kind of beige. It's the color you would expect if somebody wore a white shirt for 10 years. So yeah, the French, Isabella color. Okay, this story is not true, but it's lore, and so it's important. By the way, lore of the people, that would be folklore. That's where we get the word folklore. Folklore in Spanish, it comes from this idea of lore. All right, I will continue with the story of Florinda on my next program. Please listen then.
Miguel Indurain, Ruth Beitia, Jorge Lorenzo, Carolina